allows is that as the turbine goes from cold to hot, it thermally grows from this fixed point forward. But while this support is here, next to the hot section, it gets hot relative to the support on the front, which doesn't. And therefore, this gas turbine, the back end grows up in relation to the front end. And so that means that you have to misalign the gas turbine to whatever you're driving purposely when it's cold, so that when it gets hot, it grows so that it's into alignment. And the coupling needs to be able to accommodate that amount of misalignment while the gas turbine is growing. The other thing is, since it's located, fixed point here, and the turbine is going to grow towards the front, well, the thrust bearing is up at the front on this design, which means that the shaft is going to grow from this point. The shaft grows faster than the casing. It's more encompassed by the hot gases. It has no cooling around it. And so the shaft grows faster, and there's a startup transient where the shaft grows backwards while the casing slowly grows forward. Well, one's steel, one's cast iron. They're not hugely different, but you're right, they are different. So your final steady state position is going to be different than your cold position. Yeah, you're right. I was jumping ahead. The other thing is, because this is taking air from the outside world, as seasonal changes come in from winter to summer, the temperature in this front area will change. And so during the winter, that front support is going to shrink, and during the summer, it's going to expand. And so all things else being equal, you're going to have a slow seasonal rock of the engine as it goes from winter to summer. Now we'll get into the axial. That's what I skipped ahead, sorry. So this is the axial misalignment. Because we've got this growth differential between the rotor and the stator, while cold, you may have a certain offset. When you start the turbine up, it's going to grow backwards, which is going to compress these diaphragm sections. And eventually, though, when the transient is over and everything's at steady state, it'll grow back again. And depending on the location of the thrust bearing and the coefficient of expansion of the materials that are involved, it could grow back to the original cold location. It could not grow back quite so far. It could actually grow back even further. So all of these different misalignment combinations have to be accounted for by the flexible elements of these couplings. Meanwhile, they have to be able to transmit the full torque and the full speed of the machine, which usually means somewhere between 30 and 50,000 horsepower. So how much misalignment are we allowed? 1/4 of a degree. For a 48-inch spacer between the two flexible sections, that allows us just under 1/4 of an inch of offset between shafts. That's not a tremendous amount, but normally we use a 24-inch or shorter spacer, so we're usually only allowed about 1/10 of an inch of offset. So that means that after the equipment is installed at its site, it has to be shimmed and set so that the shaft center lines are within 1/10 of an inch of each other. And we're talking equipment that weighs anywhere up to 120, 150,000 pounds. So it's very precise installation requirements when it comes down to machinery alignment. As you notice here, this is the exhaust plenum and that's the compressor. There's not a whole lot of space in there. So there's not a lot of room between the shaft end. The other thing is, the coupling has to be physically small enough to be able to fit through spaces like that so it can be installed. And actually on this train of equipment, when we were setting it up for this test, we found out that the coupling didn't fit. And so there was a crash remanufacturing job by the coupling manufacturer to cut it into 3 pieces so that we could send each individual piece in and then reassemble it inside that small area. Different contractor. Completely different contractor. The manufacturer will, at the most, he may send a representative out to the site to supervise installation, but it's the local labor force of millwrights who will actually do the installation.
But there will be definitely a lot of confidence going back and forth.
Oh, there is a possibility of it, yeah. If it turns out that it's the first time that this kind of machinery is being brought together, there's a lot of room for error. And so, yeah, it could very well be that something doesn't get put in right. And while there will be a lot of complaining and finger pointing between this vendor and that vendor, the guy who's at site, he recognizes that the plant startup is what's important, not who gets the blame. And so that startup guy is going to be focused on making sure that whatever needs to get done gets done. And if that means that you take this coupling out to a local shop over there and you cut it and you weld on a couple of extra flanges and bolt it together, rebalance it, and then bring it out here and make sure it fits in, that's what's going to happen. We had the luxury on that job of having enough time on the test stand to find this out, and then we could spend a couple weeks redoing the coupling, and we weren't faced with a factory startup right then. We're just on the test stand. So, but you're right. There is a potential for a conflict, and there is a potential that something could not work out quite right. And it's up to the guys in the field to make sure that what's really important get executed, which is supporting the facility in its startup. Okay. I have finished what I wanted to talk about as far as the equipment goes. And a couple things before you go. This is something we're going to talk about next class. It could be tomorrow if you're here, or next week. It's an interesting story. I think you'll like it. I've covered a lot of material in kind of a fast time, and even though you know where the presentation is and you can get it and look at it at your leisure, there's no way that we could possibly cover all of the information that you might be interested in. And so Gary Ehlers, who is the head of the Rotating Equipment Group, actually has classes that go on in the afternoons, or actually during lunch on Thursdays, that goes into a lot of depth on different aspects of rotating equipment. It's an ongoing class, and if there's things that you're interested in and we're having a class soon about it, you're welcome to attend those. If it's something you're interested in and there's no class coming up soon, you can certainly talk to any of us to try to get answers about it. But, yeah. Gary's got it, and I'll tell you what, where I have these presentations, I'll put the syllabus and schedule up there at the same place. It's every Thursday. So you can see what's coming up. It's held over in Arcadia on the third floor, one of the conference rooms. So that's all there. Now, you picked up several handouts. Two of them were slides of the presentation. One of them was the gas turbine performance curves. One of them is the quiz, and one of them is an evaluation form. And so you've listened to me for a long time. I'd like to hear from you. If you could take a few minutes and look through that evaluation form and answer the questions that kind of you think make sense, and skip the ones that don't. You don't need your name on it. Or actually, I'd rather not have your name on it. Don't want to know who's what, but I have to do another session of a different style for the remainder of rotating equipment, and any good criticisms I get will help make that presentation better.
Do you have any more quizzes or have it up on the board?
I'm sorry? Oh, did we run? I don't. Maybe I do.